Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Labours of Sports Coaching with myself, Mark Carroll. I'm really happy today to be joined by Temisan Williams, who is the founder of Coach Accelerator, which is, and I'll butcher this straight to the start, Temisan, and you can correct me, but it's almost like a coach mentorship program, but also like a program that's based around how we can help develop coaches' own personal brand. Is that accurate enough? What do you think? Firstly, obviously, how are you to start with, and then you can correct me on that first part.
I'm brilliant, Mark, and thank you very much. It's an honor to be on your podcast today and seeing the work that you've been doing, which has been excellent. And I'm happy to be able to share from my experiences and what I'm currently doing. And as you mentioned, in terms of the Coach Accelerator community, is really, I like to put it as a bit of a finishing school for coaches who want to work in academies and the elite game, and really unpacking what they actually need to know to work in the industry and also to build their brand.
And I think that's what was attracted me to your profile and finding out more about your work, because like I always talk about, like one of the sort of podcast missions, without sounding overly cheesy, is around raising conversation around contemporary coach issues and coaching and things that coaches should care about, modern day coaches should care about. And we live in a digital world, and I think the fact that what you do in some respect is about teaching people how to leverage social media use as a sports coach. I think that's so unique. It's something I think a lot of coaches are aware of that they need to do. How do we actually do it well is another thing. So like I'm quite looking forward to just getting into that. And I've also been quite open. I suppose we'll see this. I might regret doing this, but we're going to also maybe do a bit of a review on my attempts to sort of increase my own audience on social media. So let's strip it back a little bit first, and then we'll build up to my execution.
Sure.
Why should we care nowadays as a coach? Considering coaching is an applied thing, it's outside. Why should we care about our image on apps, on social media platforms? Why does this matter at all for a sports coach in today's age?
So I want to take you back to when I first started coaching, which was really the era when Facebook started coming out, and you had to get an understanding of, okay, what is this social media platform all about? And there were still the traditional ways of you reaching out and trying to make yourself be known. So you would attend events, you would send emails, some people even sent posts, letters. You would try to get down to as many different sessions you could as possible, just so that people could see you. Now it is a million times easier to be seen. And I think for the industry that we are in as coaches, it's definitely transformed, whereby it's more accessible, but you need to know what are some of the steps you need to take to be able to make sure that you use that accessibility as best as you can and with a strategy behind it. One of the things I say to coaches is that you'll plan your sessions, you'll plan your strategy or tactics for what's going to happen in the pitch, but yet you have no plan for social media, which you use every day. That doesn't quite add up. And when you understand how you can leverage it, it will transform your journey for you.
So it's almost like social media is its own session. It's like how we're planning for that session in itself. Like there's work to be done on it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And the thing is, and then you straight for it off, I always think it's useful to play sort of devil's advocate with these kind of topics, because while this is a modern approach and a modern, perspective on it, we still have modern coaches who maybe would actually say that, is this losing sight, or is this a form of procrastination when you should be getting better at doing the job of coaching? So what's the response to that? Because there's some credibility within that. We're coaches, obviously, we do want to spend most of our time getting good at coaching, but is this more a case that while we're doing that, we could be accelerating growth opportunity through, connections to other people, networking to get into spaces and places where we can get better anyway, while we also actually get better at the craft itself? So is it one of these things? It's not necessarily a rejection of one for the other. It's that we can be doing both things at once.
Exactly that. It's both and. Ultimately, you have to be able to coach. And one of the things I say to coaches is that you've got to, as much as possible, especially if you're starting out, you've got to get to at least 30 hours coaching a week and coaching different age groups. You've got to develop your craft, because ultimately when you're there in front of, if, for example, you're going for a role at a professional club, they need to see that you can coach. They're not going to look at your social media profile in terms of judging whether they take you or not. So that's the most important thing in that regards. Now, when it comes to building your brand on social media, but also being able to leverage in terms of your network, I look at it this way. So if you were to look at your screen time and see, okay, I have spent 4.5 hours on my screen time or 5 hours on my screen time, and then you also add maybe if you watch TV an hour, 2 hours, 2 hours a day, that's 6 hours. That means at least if you could even give 3 hours, which is half that time, 3 hours to developing your online presence, you're already ahead of the game, way ahead of the game than many other coaches. And for me, it's a case of how do you firstly utilize your time better? So it's not a case of, oh, I need to now try and expand my time even more. No, what's the time you're already using on social media that actually, instead of being a content consumer, you can actually be a content producer? And people nowadays are only, whatever industry you're in, you're only ever going to fall really in two camps. You're either going to be a content consumer or content producer. And I know which one will actually give you more return for what you do, just like what you're doing, Mark, in terms of your podcast.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny when you say it that way, it's true in it, because regardless of if you're creating content or consuming it, you're still spending time online, and that is it. Like, the fact of it is, like, how useful are you making that time count? Does it make that time work for you or work for others? And that's the difference in it. It's almost a wee bit more empowering if you consider it in that respect. That, again, and I suppose just these are where there's a lot of topics that I think are all equally important that sometimes clash together with this, particularly within the coaches sort of world. We know how obviously time-consuming coaching is in itself. You know, where coaches are, you know, if they're not coaching all night, they're planning during their working day, if they're not full-time coaches. And I suppose that's, the reason I say this is always another concern I think people sometimes have around getting more into social media. Is it more consumption of ourselves by the job in terms of burning ourselves out? But it doesn't need to actually equate to more time, like you said. It's actually like, well, how are you just utilising the existing time that you have better? Doesn't even need to be. And I think one thing that's helped me slightly in that respect, not necessarily that I'm getting outcomes out from it, but like I'm getting rid of the stuff, the apps on my phone. I know maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but I'm trying to at least keep logged onto certain sites, but doing it on my computer so that I still can kind of close down the computer at the end of the day. That's obviously, I have the luxury of doing that. Just my job's mostly off field now, but it's that sort of, there's always a tension to be had there, isn't there? And I think what you make around, well, you're on these spaces anyway, so rather than mindlessly scrolling, can you be doing something productive?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think when you actually start realizing the impact that it can have on your life, and ultimately, and we'll go into it later, I'm sure, the lives of others, it becomes so exciting. And you start looking at it in a different perspective.
So have you got any examples then? So have you, let's say, maybe as part of your own sort of biography, how have you benefited, like, in your own career, like, from having this sort of active presence on social media? Obviously, it's sort of now mixed in with your job in terms of your mentorship company, but was there anything more practically that it led to? Because obviously, and I forgot to mention this, that Temisan's, coached and worked for Arsenal, Tottenham, Fulham, I think it's Southend United as well.
Yes.
So where's that interaction between those different experiences, I wonder?
Yes, so I'll start with, obviously, the coaching. I had to, firstly, myself, be able to coach and be able to know what I'm talking about in terms of the experiences that I had, and being able to, of course, work across, it would be five academies, because I also was at Cambridge Centre of Excellence for Girls as well. That was one of the academies at too, very early on my journey. But being able to do that, I realized actually I ended up being in a privileged position, being able to be in academies, because when I did the maths, approximately there are only about 0.1% of coaches who in this country who actually work in academies. And the majority of coaches are in grassroots, are volunteering, but they want to work in these spaces. But I felt as though the reality of what you need to do, how you navigate the industry, was not really being shared. So that's one of the reasons why I did that. Now, in terms of how I've benefited, and I'll be honest, in terms of, I'll go to LinkedIn first. In terms of LinkedIn, I only really started seriously focusing on LinkedIn for a year. So it's only been 1 year. On X, it's probably been about three years. So I think I saw the trajectory with X first before I did with LinkedIn. With LinkedIn, my eyes have been opened in incredible ways to what can come from you posting regularly and sharing regularly. So just to give you an example, since July, when I started to interview coaches within the professional game for my community, so I do videos in terms of insights to their journey, insights to the coaching industry. Since July, I've been able to do 80 interviews up till now. And of those 80, 98% have come from LinkedIn. So not through my own network, through me actually contacting people on LinkedIn, developing a relationship with them on LinkedIn and being able to connect with them. And these are coaches from all across the world. These are coaches right the way from pre-academy to first team. These are coach analysts. These are performance coaches, SSE coaches. And in terms of names of clubs, who are, people who have been able to interview, been from Man United to Barcelona to Ajax, and it's been incredible. And then some of the other things I've been afforded is being able to be on podcasts like this, and there's actually been quite a number of podcasts I've been able to be on. Being able to go onto the Overlap, who I know many people know, Gary Neville's Overlap, and being able to go onto their offshoot, the Breakdown. I've been flown out to France to be able to do a conference as well, being flown out for free to do that. So it's actually opened up my network, not just nationally, but internationally in the space of a year.
It's incredible. And I suppose as well, just for those that are listening, and Temisan, I don't know if this has been updated since, but you've got, I think, roughly is it 120,000 followers across social media. So obviously you've really worked hard to, build that following. Is that still accurate, the numbers? I think they're around about that mark. Right? Yeah, it's just
astounding. In and around those numbers across TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X.
Well, let's think, because obviously you started the conversation on LinkedIn. Let's think about what makes LinkedIn something that can be leveraged then. So does it help the fact that obviously everyone that joins LinkedIn, they've got a bit of skin in the game. They're trying to, increase their network. They're trying to share with other people deliberately, and it's very specific to their vocation and our context coaching. So is it just to the fact that there's almost like everyone's sort of encouraged to sometimes just reach out to people, to talk to people, to become partners with people, and that also probably is meeting sport coaching in a place that it currently is in, where it's now a national, global job market, whereas in previous years it was a more localized job market. So is it just a timing, do you think, that LinkedIn's maybe just become so potent and rich as an opportunity that we can use to sort of increase opportunities for ourselves? Does LinkedIn have some sort of property to it that other social media platforms lack, or is it just different? How would you maybe compare them?
So you're on the right track, definitely. LinkedIn, of course, is specific for professionals, if you like, those who come on LinkedIn for career-wise or business-wise. You really want to try and develop in your trajectory in that way. Now, I always tell coaches that if you want to grow your network specifically to football coaching in relation to maybe a career, you want to work at a club, then LinkedIn and X are the two. Not necessarily TikTok and Instagram, because the people who you're trying to connect with, they are more so on these platforms. They're not going to be on TikTok and Instagram as much. So you've got to really focus and hone in on these, and probably more so leaning towards LinkedIn. And the reason why I say that is because whenever I have messages from those who've watched my content, they've always said, "Oh, I saw your stuff on X." They never say, "I saw your stuff on Instagram or TikTok." So I've started to see that correlation between LinkedIn and X.
Okay. Is TikTok and Instagram, would you say, are they more like entertainment streams maybe, or is it less so about conversation and stuff like that? Is that sort of why?
Yeah, so I think and I'm not a specialist on
Yeah,
these
yeah, for
platforms
your own
at all.
opinion. Yeah.
But with Instagram, I would say it's more so when you've got your video content and maybe you're doing business wise in relation to you're developing your coaching club or you're wanting to work with players individually, etc. Then that's been good. And I have another company, as we mentioned beforehand, Excellence Academy, where I was doing one-to-one coaching and things of that nature, and that's why I picked up a lot of clients through Instagram. And of course, you can do it on TikTok as well. Not to say you can't have that on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is more so where the professionals, those are who are in the clubs, that's where they are. That's where they are trying to make sure that they're being seen. That's what I would say. I would definitely say when it comes to LinkedIn, though, and this is probably across the board, you have to really be clear on what's your aim. You have to be really clear. What is your aim? What do you want to do? Do you want to be a business owner? Is that what you're trying to achieve? Do you want to develop in a career in a certain way in terms of going to first team or being an analyst or working at academy? Once you know your aim, that will, and again, similar to what we talked about in terms of your strategy, your tactics, that will help guide now how you're going to operate and what you're going to share, and you may skew in certain directions, but of course, your audience will give you feedback to allow you to know what's really hitting them and what's really resonating with them.
And if you were to give me an example, then how might we differentiate, let's say, from someone who wants to work, and maybe let's say our own sport, football, so someone that maybe wants to work in senior football, how are they posting and how are they engaging in LinkedIn differently from someone who maybe is working in the youth game or perhaps a coach developer? A bit more abstractly, what would you see as sort of differences in perhaps the way they might, attack that sort of online space?
So I think firstly, it's definitely around, and you've said it already. So if I'm looking at first team, okay, what are some of the nuances around first team? Whether it be performance, whether it be injuries, whether it be some of the challenges that you have to deal with at first team level with media and things of that nature. And then the people who you really want to be following are the ex-pros. So, for example, Stephen Corker, he released something recently about playing with injuries. Okay, you want to now engage with him, see what he's been posting around first team and start to get an understanding of what people really are interested in around that area and they resonate with. And then when it comes to youth, then it may be a case of, okay, letting them play, or are we creating as many individual players to share their technical abilities, etc., or we pigeonholing them? So now you're starting to shape it in that way.
Do you know that is true? Because I mean, if there's one thing, and maybe I'll just sort of gather this implicitly, I find that when I am, if I've ever had like a conversation or a post to say around issues that perhaps a first team manager or someone more in performance sport might encounter, the conversation is normally slanted, and this is me being an academic, but the conversation is normally slanted towards what academia sometimes gets wrong, or what sort of the dominant rhetoric is that perhaps isn't always situationally appropriate, like where, I recall, talking a little bit back around, coaches using sweary words sometimes at the right moments can equally be emotionally intelligent. It just depends on when. That's a very different and quite a targeted post compared to, we need to get more access for kids to play in local parks. That's probably going to attract a different audience and perhaps is suited towards different aims, isn't it, in terms of trying to start a conversation that you can utilise for your own benefits insofar as opportunity. Is that probably around the right lines?
Yes, definitely. And even as you just spoken of there, for example, and I know we're going to go through it later, but when we look at your post, definitely, I think with your background, of course, within academia and coach development, that's where your speciality is. And I think it's also important to lean upon what your speciality is first, before then you can get even more feedback from others because you know your story. And I think for a lot of people, they think, well, okay, but who would want to hear what I have to say? Well, if no one's heard what you have to say because you've only told it to yourself, because you've lived your story every day, then it's interesting to everyone else because they don't know that story. So what you have to do is to think around your story. And that's what I did. I took time before I actually started posting. I took time to say, right, Demi, right from the beginning, when you wanted to be a coach, right the way through to where you are now. List every single that you can remember, every single experience that you had along that journey, and then just turn that into a story for a post.
That's interesting, yeah, because I suppose we're all trying to create a sort of a niche for ourselves, or try to sort of communicate some sort of narrative that explains what we do, but it doesn't put us into a space that we can't lean on that in a way that we feel confident. Just like I would always say, being someone who's a non-ex-pro, I need to formulate a different story within performance sport or within football coaching probably than maybe someone who's been an ex-pro and they can lean on other experiences. So I need to create credibility for myself in a different way. Is that probably that accurate? Like there's a different way of still getting to the same outcome, but it has to be authentic so that you can actually sit in it a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. And you are your niche. That's the reality. You are your niche. You're the only one that's lived that story. I've never been an academic. Have I been to university? Yes. Have I been on a master's? Yes. But I've never actually been academic in terms of teaching others and lecturing, nor have I gone through a PhD. So again, that's something that you can lean upon because there will be an audience for that, and people who are thinking, should I go and do a doctorate? How will that help my coaching? How would it be to be a coach developer? These are things that people are thinking about, and you will effectively find your community, but you just need to post. And I think that's where I would just encourage your listeners to say, no one cares as much as you think. I know that may sound harsh, but it should encourage you, because ultimately what it means is that they're not thinking about your post as much as you think they are until they do. And for some people, it may take 3 months of just seeing you post before, I really liked this post, or I'm not too sure about that, or I had a different experience and I'm going to comment on it. But the more you get into the cycle of, I don't know, should I post, should I not post? Before you know, months go by and actually you haven't moved forward.
That is true. It's almost like, plus when it does land, it will stick. But if it doesn't, you're kind of just shouting out at the ether anyway. So until you've kind of reached that point, you shouldn't be held up.
And I've been very surprised.
Yeah.
For example, one of my biggest posts on LinkedIn for I think almost 6 months was the shortest post that I did. At the time, I thought to myself, how does this do this in comparison to some of the others? But it's because it's the feedback of what the community are telling me that is really connected with them.
Do you know one thing I would say to add to that? And I wonder if you've had this with previous people that you've worked with, but I always think that sometimes there's a little bit of trepidation around, and I think for the right reasons, but maybe it goes too far around the idea of a digital footprint. So when you post something online, it's not like a face-to-face conversation where it can be forgotten about. There is traces of that in some ways forever. And I think a lot of coaches are worried about that. And particularly, I think when you've got coaches who, they're not, by extension of being an employee of a club or organisation, they aren't just representing themselves. And I always wonder, how is that something we need to get over, or is it something that probably rightly show we probably should still keep in mind, but it's just, not letting it paralyze us. That's my own personal. Sometimes that's something for me that's sometimes I need to think a little bit, twice, 3 times before I consider what I'm going to say. But what's your thoughts around that? I just wonder, because that's an inhibitor in some sense, for maybe good reasons, maybe not so good reasons.
Yeah, again, with that, people don't particularly, as I said before, they're not taking time to really deep dive into what you're doing especially in the coaching space. Now, I have friends who work in, for example, in finance space, and before they get a role, the person has gone through every single episode of their podcast. They've gone through reams and reams of what they've done. But in coaching, I haven't seen that, and actually, it's actually encouraged, as long as, of course, you're not slating the club, and you're not putting, for example, club names out there. So that's what I don't do.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have seen on LinkedIn. I really post around particular club names, even though I've been at certain clubs. There'll be certain occasions where I'll do it, but it's for a specific reason. I've thought about why, and I wouldn't, again, slate a club either.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. That certainly resonates with me. I think There's also, I think there seems to be a bit of a growing realisation here as well that not that business brands themselves are dead, so not to say that clubs and they don't have a powerful brand, but I think if people are worried perhaps around the impact on their organisation, sometimes it's actually looking at it from more of a strength base to look at that they can be a strength to their organisation by improving their brand through your own personal brand, because people follow people sometimes rather than necessarily clubs. And sport's a strange place. I'm saying this in one way, but it is a bit different from a shampoo company. A club is a big attractor in its own right, so it's that sort of risk to benefit. But there is something I think in that, if it's not necessarily about supporting your company brand, that you can't necessarily hurt it, but you can at least further elevate your own profile, which to some extent your company or your organisation, your sport club, whatever, they're trying to then sort of reap some rewards from anyway. So
definitely, and it shines a light on the positivity of a club, especially if you're sharing what I call is bookmarkable posts. So the majority of people on LinkedIn, and this is how actually you can win very, very easily on LinkedIn, because most people, they post when they've got a new job or when they've maybe gone to an event, and typically that means that they're maybe posting anywhere between 3 to 8 times a year. Whereas if you actually use LinkedIn to add value to others, so just to give you an example, and I'll take you as an example, Mark. Yeah. So you could do a post on the 7 things you need to know about being a coach developer, the 7 challenges that I had as a coach developer, something I didn't know before I started as a coach developer. That's just 3. Those are things that people want to bookmark because they're now thinking, oh yeah, actually I can still go back to that. That's what I need to remind myself of that because I want to be a coach developer, or I want to understand a bit more around coaching. And you give them something that they can actually utilize, then it's more likely that they will save it to their bookmarks. And then what it does, it means that when someone checks their bookmarks after 3 months, 6 months, you're still in there. Or they bookmark a lot of your stuff, and now they're looking more at what you're doing, and now they're sharing more of what you're doing because they're noticing that they're consuming a lot of your content. So what I always say to people is make sure you're doing bookmarkable stuff. Yes, you can do the other things of when you've got something new that's gone on, a new job, etc. But you want to do things that are actually actionable for people to be able to take and change their lives. And I think for me, what really stood out was about 2 months ago, a coach messaged me and said, "Temisan, I'm really grateful. Thank you for what you've been doing. And I actually used one of your posts and got an academy job." And I was like, "Wow!" So you just actually took the actions that I said on the post and you did it, and now you're where you want to be. And so that gives me the encouragement of why it's important to keep continue posting.
And does this maybe sort of lean into just human psychology that I don't think we, like, if I see a post that's just by someone who just seems to be bragging about themselves, or not necessarily, it's a post that doesn't offer me anything, it's probably human nature that we aren't really necessarily want to.
Yeah, we want to
consume that in the same level. Yes. We want what can you give me as opposed to what am I just learning about you? And is that because I'll be honest, like maybe we can. This is a wee bit of a segue into because we spoke off air obviously, and I was quite happy for you do a bit of a review on me in terms of to help with the do's and don'ts here, because I'm someone that's trying to get better at this, but I still haven't really got it quite right. So like that's one thing, for example, that I sometimes wonder around is how much do I sell, like this podcast or other work that I'm doing, or versus how much do I share, and sort of like where it doesn't seem like I'm trying to get something out of people. Because it shouldn't always be that way, maybe, because you aren't going to get the same traction. I don't know, but yeah, maybe we start that off. You can tell me if you've had any thoughts, even from looking at my profile for that.
So before we deep dive into that, into your profile, I want to touch on what you said around the psychology, and definitely people, we want to think, what am I going to get from this? Whether am I going to get entertained? Am I going to pick up something that will help me to develop? And so that's what you have to always lead with. How am I going to help people? And I say to coaches, and it's something that I've taken on myself, because, so as an example, when I started my coaching journey, I set myself a 10-year plan to be able to go from where I wanted to go. And my thing is, okay, you have to add value to others, be prepared to do it for 10 years, which means that you've got to be in it for the long haul and be willing to help people for free. Now, for some, they may think, why would you be helping people for free? Well, if you help people for free and they see what you can do and you continue to help them for free, if you help them for free 100 times, then when you may have an ask and say, well, look, I have this thing actually which you can be a part of, or I have something you can subscribe to, etc., they are more likely then to do that because you've helped them exponentially. And now when you have the one ask, it's not really an ask because you've helped them so much already. And so that's the first thing I'll definitely say for those who really want to take it seriously. The other thing is be consistent. It's such a superpower. It's an unbelievable superpower, just being consistent. And the great thing about LinkedIn is that you can schedule posts for as long as possible, as long as you want. And you can sit down for, say, okay, well, on a Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to sit down for 2 hours. I'm going to schedule all my posts for the week. That's done. Or I'm going to schedule all my posts for 2 weeks. And that is done. And by doing that, it means that you don't have to stay on the hamster wheel of having to try and do it every single day. And it also just gives you that block of time to really think about, okay, what am I going to do for this week for coaches? Let me do a bit of a review and then I go forwards. And so it doesn't need to be time consuming, but just taking that block of time can be really effective in that way. No, so do you want me to have a look at your profile, Mark?
I just think for other people's benefit, maybe because if maybe I'm making mistakes other people are, or maybe there's a little something that I'm doing okay, I don't know. You can tell us and then I can take notes and, it helps other people and also myself,
Sure. The first thing, and which is really good, you've got a picture where you're smiling.
I was going to ask you about this tonight, and I wonder.
That's the first thing.
Should I see a lot of coaches with profile pictures where they look miserable coaching, and I was wondering about that. I don't know what that is, or is that not
happy?
Matter?
No, you have something where you're smiling. You've got a bit of a grin, or that's completely fine. So that's really good. That's really good. You've got that. Now, the thing that is definitely missing, which so many people do, is that the header, they either don't have anything, or I've seen headers where it's a blurry picture. That header, you need to see it as, it needs to tell people who you are. So it might be just an example, and I'll give you mine as an example. So I've got proven blueprints to elevate your personal coaching level. So people already have an orientation of okay, I think I have an idea of what I can get from reading this individual's profile. And so for you, it may be something around being able to understand academia, how academia links to coaching as an example, but something as a strap line, which helps people know, okay, this is what this person is about and what I can get from them. And then from there, in the heading, you really want to have some numbers. So I know you've got lecturer, you've got host of labors, podcasts, you've got coach educator, but on there you may have something around how many episodes you've done. Host of labor, 100 plus episodes. It might be lecturer for 15 plus years. It might be coach educator over 50. You may have delivered over 50 coach educator, UFSC licenses or something of that nature. So those numerical things, because it helps people to remember that. And it's the same thing in the about page. In the about page, it really wants to be your proof of work, what you've done. And then you want to make it easily digestible for people to be able to read. Again, headline, have you got something with numbers in it that will help people to remember you, and things that can help them guide their eyes. So when you have numbers, it really helps people to skip to where the important information is and take those chunks. And then your links here. So really good that you've got links here, firstly, because most people don't actually have any types of links.
And we were saying links here for people that are listening. This is when you're sort of scrolling just below the top bit, isn't it? Where there's like featured parts.
In the featured part.
Yeah.
So you have the links there, which is really good. I'd probably say with your podcast image, you may want to have something a bit bolder with like a speaker or a guest who you're speaking to. It might be an image of you with the mic or something like that. Something that's more engaging.
Action shots.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got that, just like you have the St. Mirren partnership. You see how that's a bit more engaging. You see two people there, and then you've got the MSc Sports Science. You've got something where you can see that actually a coach is dealing with a player. So those are more, those will pull in people more so having those images there.
And if coaches don't have that, we should be try to get, like if I'm that other coach maybe it's listening in, they don't have that action shot, should we be trying to get something like that maybe?
Definitely.
Try to get something going on. Okay.
Definitely.
Nice.
And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some of because obviously posts is next, and I'm going to go through some of the posts.
Mm-hmm.
So the first, let's see, first couple have been reposted, and what I would say is reposting is fine, but you really want to quote repost. So if you're going to repost something, add your thoughts on it as well. So instead of just reposting, because otherwise people will really just scroll through, or they're going to click on that person, and actually you haven't shared any of your thoughts. There's a reason why you reposted it. So let people understand a little bit about you before they then click on that post as to why you did that.
And is that almost like also a show of respect for the people that are creating that content, and then in turn just human nature again here, they'll probably show, all right, we're going to do the same back to you, and then it's sort of helping each other a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think you've already shown that respect by reposting anyway. I think with the quote in it, with the quote, I think even the person, as you mentioned, even the person who you've reposted, whose original content it is, by you actually quoting it, because they can see who's reposted, but by you actually quoting on it, it feels as though, okay, this person's taken a little bit more extra time. Now they'll go and click, and I do that. So if my post has been reposted, I would more so be inclined to click on the person who quoted and added their own bits to it, because they've taken the time to do that. They've thought about it and they're doing that. So I'll definitely say in that regards to do that. And then definitely for you is now just actually posting your own thoughts, because you've got a lot of reposts, but it doesn't give people an insight into who you actually are. And that
comes back to the story you're trying to sell, isn't it? So now I need to think about that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour, Mark.
Yeah, I know. No, good. I just need to keep you going after. I'm not wanting to interrupt you, because I'm taking notes here, so it's good. No, so good. I mean, there was a couple of things I was curious about that we can speak more, just wider scale now, about should people then, I suppose, do we need to invest time to understand the algorithms, perhaps, of certain social media platforms as well? Like, I used to be told, like, with LinkedIn, for example, like, it doesn't actually want you to post all the time, but it wants maybe, as they say, like about 18 hours between things and these sorts of stuff. Is that things you're conscious of? Has it helped you in the past? Is there things around that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we do need to respect the algorithms of each platform. And one, for example, on LinkedIn is that if you're going to share a link on your post, do it at least 15 minutes afterwards, if not more. So you can edit your LinkedIn post as many times as you want, and however long in the future you want to. So you want to do the post, and then you want to add your link to it 15 minutes, half an hour later, because it doesn't like when you're redirecting people away from LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think I've heard that already, actually. Yeah, it's not so much about the links.
Exactly. So you can have it, but you just need to be tactical about how you do that. And then when you've actually done a post, you do the first comment, because it helps people to start the conversation, because usually people don't necessarily particularly want to be the first person to comment. So at least if you be the first person to comment, then it can encourage more people to then comment on your posts as well. And one of the key things that we are now moving more and more to is, especially if you're wanting to maybe gain sponsorships, or you want your post to continue doing well, people are more so looking at the comment section than actually a number of followers. So you could have someone who's got 100,000 followers, but actually when they do a post, they maybe only have 5 or 6 comments. But then you have someone who has 30,000 and their post gets 100 comments. People like spending more time thinking about what other people are saying. And I've gone through some of my posts whereby people are having full-blown conversations that I'm not even involved in. And it's great because I read it and I can see the back and forth that's happening, and it gives me more ideas to, this is how people are really concerned about this, or they're really excited about this, or really have views on this. And so that helps shape your content as well going forwards.
Well, do you know what's interesting now when you say that? Because, I mean, I've read some of your posts and I do the same thing where I've seen the comments and I'm like just enjoying like what people are talking about.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you also notice the same faces sometimes appearing in them. And then if you end up engaging with them, it's, you know, it's funny because it's easy to sometimes see people that are putting in that extra effort that I think you're saying really does reward yourself with it. So, I suppose, if there's one thing I'm taking from you so far, Tim, is it's like, it's not just about production and post after, but it's about authentic engagement in that sort of, without using that word that people always say, that community. It's that, and it sort of, it replenishes itself through people contributing towards it. So it's really, you know, you get out of it what you put in to some degree, maybe. But
exactly that. And I have helped coaches in the game, not just coaches, those who are physiotherapists who ask me, okay, how do I do my LinkedIn? And I've shared things with them. Just an example, I've spoken to someone the other day at a club, and physiotherapist, started about 2 weeks ago. I think it was his third or fourth post, did something like 15,000 impressions. And that was just his third post. And he was like, wow. I said, yeah, well, because this is what you did. This is how you shaped it. This is another conversation, but don't just leave it at that. And this is where you have to now start engaging even deeper with your community, whereby I would look through all the reactions. So say the reactions are 100 reactions. I would click on them, go to the person's profile and send them a personal message and say, thank you for your engagement. Is there anything else that you would like to see me post about? Yeah. And that may be a little bit laborious, but in the early stages, it will definitely pay off dividends to help shape what people really like. And most of the time, people say, no, thank you, it's been really good. And then some will give me some insight into what additional things they'd like to see from me.
And I could imagine, just in terms of what the response might be to that, if you have either already been active in that community, you've been engaging in other people's posts, you've been sharing information. So that, just again, what often happens, someone then, you get the icon saying someone's viewed your profile.
Yeah.
I've seen, and I've had this even where people approach myself, if they just come and say, can you do something for me? And you don't know who they are. They haven't even really got much a sort of footprint to maybe allow you to kind of tell a little bit about themselves. And, you know, you're not going to be as open to that. Whereas if you see someone that looks quite genuine in the way that they've been maybe posting and engaging in that sort of medium, even if you don't know them from industry, like you might have a bit more truck with trying to get to know them. Conscious, and I suppose that obviously we're as a whistle stop tour, and I think it sounds like pretty obvious sense here that if we're understanding the need to be more active as coaches on social media, we should probably invest time into understanding the algorithms and these sorts of things to just help with efficiencies. Like, we're all about high performance, aren't we, as coaching? So we still do what we do well and do it better. I'm conscious of your time, so I just wondered, is there anything very quickly you might even tell us about X? As you said, you mentioned that, and I just wonder what would be your top 2 or 3 tips there, even if you want to give us it quickly. I think that'd be really interesting to know about.
Sure. Just before I move on to X, the last thing I want to say, especially because I'm LinkedIn, and it's something I share with my coaches who I mentor, is one of the things I've recognized, and it's not just from my journey, but it's having the privilege of speaking to many professionals within the game. Your qualifications are your dress code, but your network is your ticket. And ultimately, you can have the qualifications, you could have developed your craft, but if you don't know certain people in certain positions, or you have mentors who have certain experiences, it can be very difficult for you to be able to progress in the football industry. And so this is why I say to coaches, this is really critical for you to do, especially if you want to progress forward in your opportunities. And I've been offered opportunities that are not out there, haven't been shared out there. Someone said, Temisan, we've got this. Do you want to, is it of interest to you? So there are those opportunities that do come as well. Now, just going on to X. So how I started out with that really was just posting my sessions. And I did quite a number of sessions, whether it be 1v1s, 2v2s, and going all the way up. And from there, just seeing how people responded to the different sessions that I'd put on, which were, and I did it as a thread. So you'd have the session, and I used tactical pads. So I think that was also a benefit. So it wasn't just a static practice. It was a tactical pad whereby it was moving and you could see the movement of the practice. So it was that. Then it had the details of the practice. Then it had the benefit for players, and then one of the other things I added was I would repost, so I'd quote post one of my old posts as well onto it. So by doing that, it helps people to see. So as an example, I did half space practices, and I did a 3-part to it, and I added so that effectively each time someone would click, they would then click on the one before. And cumulatively, for example, that those 3 posts, I think, did 500,000 views cumulatively. But that's another way as well of keeping people engaged, and then making sure, again, you're speaking with people in terms of the comments. One of the big things now on X is having threads. So
yeah, I see that a lot.
One of my biggest posts has actually been with Sammy Lander, who's the world's first substitution coach. And I interviewed him, and I just did a breakdown of, okay, these are the things that you need to know as a coach around substitutions. And that did very well. And so people like reading when they come to X now. They like reading through threads and that engagement on threads. And you can add, of course, videos and part of your thread. You can add different images. And again, there is a structure to that. I know we haven't had time to go into it, but there's also a structure around language, and that's probably another podcast in itself.
Yeah.
How you use your language, how you use your characters, what are some of the words that you use, how you use certain symbols. That's even another episode.
Yeah, and look, I'm all for that. We might get you back another time, Temisan, where we can get it. For those, however, that can't wait until that episode, how might people, because like we mentioned this, and it's really important, I find, that we get use this platform to promote what you're doing, which is such great and modern work. With the Coach Accelerator, where can people find out about that? Because you have clients remote all across the world now, so if people want to get engaged, they want to interact with you, they want to get coaching from you, but their own personal branding in coaching, what can they do? Where can they find you?
Sure. So if they go onto my LinkedIn profile, they'll be able to see the Coach Accelerator community, free to join. So they can join that community, and I update every single day. I also have sessions on Sundays where coaches can drop in and ask any questions that they want. So there's that for them to have. And then linked to that, I also have a newsletter where I have over 2,600 coaches who receive weekly updates on my newsletter. And again, gives them insight into not just my journey, but also tips for them to take for their coaching journey. And then a clarity call. So with any coaches, 2025 is coming. It's best to start preparing now, and don't wait until December the 31st. And they can book a free 20-minute call with me, and we can talk through what they want to do, and I can talk to them more about the community as well, the Coach Accelerator community, and they can find out how I can help them for their journey.
Yeah, fantastic. What I'll do, Temisan, as well, and for those that listen, I'll put the Coach Accelerator website, I'll put that in the show notes so that people can access that more easily as well. So yeah, no, thank you. I can only say thanks so much. And you're giving me ideas already. If I can manage to lure you back on at some point in the future, it's just great. So for those that are listening, guys, I think, like, this is kind of part of what the podcast is about, is talking about, like I say, contemporary subjects like this. And while we might sometimes turn our nose up to social media or go off these sort of, I don't know what you might even call it, a lot of posturing sort of where we don't need it, our coaching does the talking for us. That is true to a point, but could you be getting that a little inch more? And if we're all about marginal gains in sport, and as coaches we care about high performance, then why are you not making the most of every opportunity perhaps to sell you and your brand as an extension of that, your club or organisation's brand as well? So hopefully that was as interesting and as helpful for you guys to listen to as it certainly was for me. I will see you next time. Thank you.